Amigos, bienvenidos a un nuevo video. El día de hoy estoy acá en Nashville, Tennessee, en el Museo de Trenes. Será mi primera vez que me suba a un tren en mi vida. Veremos cómo es esa experiencia. Acompáñenme y disfruten de este museo. Bueno, en un par de minutos nos subiremos a ese tren y bueno, a ver cómo es la experiencia andando en tren. Nunca he estado en un tren antes, esperemos que sea increíble y que bueno, pueda vivir esa experiencia. Estamos a punto de abordar el tren por primera vez en mi vida. Pues como les digo, es mi primera vez en un tren. Este viaje a Tennessee ha sido muy bueno y miraremos esta experiencia qué tal es. Realmente jamás me he sentado en un tren, me siento emocionado. Creo que regresaremos para verano. No había comido nada todo el día. Los dos chips me van a caer de toque. Realmente espero que valga la pena haber viajado casi 3 horas de Nashville hasta acá, hasta Chacayona. Me acordaré el nombre de la ciudad. Ok, el Google no miente, se llama Chattanooga, Tennessee. Es en la ciudad que me encuentro en este momento. Unas 3-4 horas alejado de Nashville.
Last local of the day, ladies and gentlemen, just as a reminder, we are mandated to have all of our passengers wear their face coverings, covering their mouth and nose at all times while on board the train. That is for your safety, but also that's a mandate we had to abide by to keep our doors open. So we understand we need to get the entire train turned around because currently we're getting away from East Chattanooga. And to do so, we will be using a mechanism that throughout railroad history they've utilized. In the case of the Y, which we're running right now, W-Y-E in our spelling, meaning this. We were leaving our Grand Junction station, and currently we are running along.
Bueno, nos obligan a usar máscara, por eso está bien, excelente.
The line we're using would be abandoned because when we get up to Missionary Ridge, the only way to get to East Chattanooga is straight up that tower. The switchman would switch one train approaching to the siding and the other approaching from the other side to pass through the tunnel. Now,
cuando regresemos iremos a ver las locomotoras. Miren, esas nubes son nubes de frío, no es de lluvia, nubes de frío.
This afternoon, were all built in the late 1940s, 1488, 1486, that had the larger passenger capacities, were eventually standardized to arch piers.
Bueno, lo que está diciendo el conductor es que yo veo bastante que la línea del tren está abajo del agua, casi 9 pies. Sería como 1,50 m más o menos. No, 2,50 m.
You could trace a line based upon the East Tennessee, Virginia, Georgia's line as foot-and-a-half of clearance between your train and the tunnel walls, ladies and gentlemen, white side tunnel.
Vamos a ver. Que nos alistemos, dice. Para poner la luz justo en la ventana, ya está encendido. Vamos a ver qué. Ok, vamos, entrando al túnel. Ahí estamos en el túnel, alright. Lo malo que el vidrio está sucio. estamos dentro del túnel. Realmente le di vuelta ya que se miraban más reflejos de los asientos que del túnel realmente. Entonces no vale la pena estar andando en lo oscuro. Ya hay una toma en el video para que vean cómo se miraba, pero no se miraba nada. Entonces por eso le di vuelta a la cámara.
We're leaving in the past through Southern Railway evaluated the structure and very seriously contemplated adding an additional floor.
Lo que me llama la atención es la historia. Bueno, que aquí comenzó el tren, aquí todas las vías del tren para la guerra civil chocaban, o sea, no chocaban, o sea, se conectaban. Y esa fue la diferencia entre la guerra civil que le ganó Estados Unidos contra ¿cómo se llamaba? Los estados del sur. Eso fue lo que marcó la diferencia. Y bueno, realmente está siendo una experiencia increíble. Realmente yo nunca he andado en tren, aquí no le puedo mentir. No sé, en Europa, yo sé que en Europa abundan los trenes. Acá en Estados Unidos trenes no hay. A puro carro, puro bus, puro Uber. Entonces para mí es una experiencia increíble, honestamente. Miren la montaña. Lástima el audífono. Bueno, no el audífono, el parlante. Creo que el parlante está malo. Así que nos estamos perdiendo parte de la información que está dando. En Chinanova. Tengo que aprenderme ese nombre de esa ciudad. Miren, llegamos a la estación. Creo que ya nos vamos a bajar. Creo, miren. Así es como funcionaba el correo en aquellos tiempos, miren. Las estaciones de tren, cómo recogían a la gente y todo, bueno. No sé si ya llegamos, estoy un poco confundido. La experiencia ha sido increíble. Bueno, sí, ya llegamos. Hay que bajarnos. Vamos a ver las locomotoras. A ver cómo son. Antes que cierre la tienda de regalos, vi un tren que me gusta para comprárselo a mi hijo. Bueno, este es en el tren en que estamos ahorita. Hemos hecho una parada para ir a ver algo, no sé qué, pero ahorita vamos a ir a ver qué hay de bueno. Vamos a ver qué hay de bueno acá.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to East Chattanooga. At least temporarily, this is the end of the line for you. And we will get this engine turned around in a few moments. Now imagine this. A lot of people say, oh, that's a very short trip. And it is, I understand that. But as far as when we first started established, which was way before I was around, well, actually just after I was around, for that matter, it was only leaving here, the original station, and going as far as the tunnel. And that's all you had. Not any fault of the museum, but that's as much property as they had at that time until, again, Southern Railway began to donate more and more property. They were able to extend to what is now our Grand Junction Station and Yard and our Y area. The table here we'll utilize in just a few moments was built originally by the American Bridge and Iron Company in Ambridge, Pennsylvania. 1916, manufactured that year, delivered to the Central Georgia Railway's Macon shops. The shops there, repair shops. So the table was not as large as you'd find or see with a large roundhouse facility. because it was not used for that purpose. Later, right around the 1920s, it was moved to Cedartown, Georgia, just south of Rome. And there, it also was utilized for a smaller version of the Macon shops there, or repair shops, and it actually there was a small roundhouse. Eventually, all operations were completely abandoned, and so too was the table. So salvaging this table meant that we could get it, save it, bring it here, install it here in the early 1980s. Now, when it was built, and just like all turntables of that era, it was not motorized. They did not have a motor like we're using here, 25 horsepower, which doesn't sound like a lot of power, but I assure you, more power, no offense, than we could possibly generate to be able to turn it around today as easily as we can with our motor. But just in case, I'll need about 4 of you, okay? If you're feeling up to it, just in case we have a malfunction with the motor, that's what they were doing though. They were turning the engines by hand. Think about this. This is 80 tons of turntable. That's before you even get the 246,000 pounds on there, which translates to about 124 tons. So 124 plus 80, the answer is that's heavy, especially having to turn it around by hand. Space shuttle, an empty space shuttle, okay, is 75 tons. It doesn't even weigh as much as the turntable. An average school bus weighs 13 tons. Who's gonna volunteer for me just in case? All right, now how in the world do they do that? This is not a pun, this is a literal, quite literally, it is a balancing act. You have to get the weight of your locomotive balanced over in the center of the structure, a bearing about 6 feet in diameter. Too far this way, the wheel's not going to meet the rail on that side. If it doesn't go far enough this way, the wheel on this side's not going to meet. Let's get this engine turned around and I'll talk to you about it. Ladies and gentlemen, 1829, and its sister engine we also own and operate here at the museum, 1824, both built by the Electric Motor Division in 1951. This is a hood unit, ladies and gentlemen. Now, a lot of people not familiar with the railroads are thinking more of the traditional diesel electric locomotives with that rounded cab with a single headlight. But this was a very commonly used type of locomotive known as a GP7 or Jeep 7. It generates about 1,500 horsepower. Now, when it was delivered to the U.S. Army and used as a switcher in Kingston, Tennessee with their ammunition plant there, it was painted up in a flat black with some gold lettering, lettered U.S. Army. All right, we're ready to turn. Now, as he brought the locomotive onto the turntable, he brought it on running it cab forward. So the cab is closest in the direction of travel. But if we didn't have a turntable like we have here this afternoon, or we didn't have a Y like we ran initially at the beginning of our trip, the engineer would simply turn his chair around and operate this engine in the opposite direction and still visibly and safely be able to do so. And that's the advantage of the design of this locomotive. Now, we have a lot of these at different horsepower. This is about 1,500 horsepower, as I mentioned before. But the Louisville Nashville engine over there, it's painted up on the NC and St. L, that yellow and red, has about 1,750 horsepower. We have several different locomotives varying horsepowers. We're going to line the turntable up just a few moments, by the way, again with track 2, because your coaches are currently there on track 1. So Conductor Gordon's staying over there helping me spot up, because believe it or not, just because it looks like it's spotted up doesn't necessarily mean it's done so from our perspective here operating. It gives us a little bit more advantage to have someone spotting, or we had to get off and look at it ourselves, because we also cannot depend. If I was turning it the opposite end, the opposite direction, I would have to have someone down here. I'd have to get off and look at it, because just because it's an alignment on one end doesn't mean it's alignment on the other. I'm going to go ahead and bring the engine off the table. Now, if you'd like to go and see part 2 of our tour, please meet me down there at the walkway. Don't cross over yet. Meet me down at the end of the train at the walkway, and I will meet you down there in just a few moments, and we'll take you over to our facility and talk to you there.
Ok, si queremos ver la segunda parte, hay que seguir por acá. Nos está esperando de abajo. Así que vamos.
That by being here. Now, some of you may have come here because you're willing to come here and you wanted to come here, but some of you that came with those willing people maybe have not been so willing and really didn't want to come out or have any interest. All right? But I want you to understand there's so much to be interested in. Now, if you're not really interested in the mechanics of the railroad, locomotives, perhaps you might be interested in some of the history of the coaches, the passenger trains, the people that own these trains. All right? Because at one point in time in this country, this was the main mode of transportation. We don't utilize the railroads like they do in Europe and Asia, mass transportation. But we did. And because of that, and because of the way the railroad systems were set up in this country, it did change, shape, and mold your lives, whether you did it or not. One of the simplest examples of that is that you know that standard time here, and the time zones, did you know that was set up due to the railroads? That was established because of the operation of railroads. All right? Where you live, perhaps, maybe where your father's father lived, just like this country and other countries, it changed, expanded businesses and where they were located. Sometimes cities were abandoned when the railroads changed and diverted those railroads around those areas, and the towns were completely abandoned. But all of this is your history. It belongs to you, regardless if you're from Chattanooga or this country or another or any area. Railroads are so vitally important to all countries. But as we sit here in Chattanooga talking about how important it was, you know, a lot of times people think about Chattanooga and really what put it on the map in later years was the song, right? A lot of people thought about that, but way before the song came about, all right? The first song that went platinum, by the way. Way before that, Chattanooga was important. When the Cherokee and the Creek and Choctaw different areas came to this area with all the natural resources that were located in this area. So let's talk about this building first and foremost. All railroads have a building like this one, all right? Not necessarily this small, all right? Because what we do here is a museum. It's a museum, that's one of our identities. Our one identity as a nonprofit. But did you know that we also operate as a railroad for different businesses? We have two sides, and that side sometimes occasionally assists with the museum side. All right, not always. Okay, but we have contracts. One of our largest contracts we have on the operating railroad side is Volkswagen. Our museum does the switching for Volkswagen. We set those auto rack trains up out at Enterprise South facility and some of the businesses there, as well as some of the businesses off of Postal Avenue in Chattanooga. Everything on property except for an iron foundry. All of the equipment, everything we need to restore this equipment is here. All right? And I'll talk about that. Why do they call this building with all railroads, large and small, a back shop? Remember, B-A-C-K. It's easier. The answer is so obvious, some people don't even want to say it. Why do they call it a back shop? Where's it located? In the back. In the back of what? Starts with a Y. Yard. The back of your yard, your rail yard. Remember, if you're taking equipment apart, not only do you have that equipment there, but the parts being taken off and replaced have to go somewhere too. So you have to have enough room to do all of that and not block your railroad. You don't want it out front, in the middle, somewhere in between. You're still trying to operate your business. You're still operating equipment in and out of your railroad. Okay? So that being said, we have 8 tracks leading into this property, and this is the last one, number 8. Okay? This building is divided up into 2 main sections. That is, the front part of the back shop, the back part of the back shop. You're all standing in the front part of the back shop. The back shop, the front part of the back shop, if it's up here over the 6-foot pit, it's like you take your car that has oil change or maintenance. Same thing. You can do that here. There's a shallow pit on track 7 and a deeper pit on this end. All right? So you can do that. But dividing the 2 parts up means this. The time it takes to be able to turn around and get this equipment back out and running. All right, it's always generally shorter if it's up here. If it's back there, it's going to take a lot longer. It doesn't mean we forget about it. It just means it's going to take much longer, which generally means more money. All right, but what I've been told about some of the equipment in the back is that the money has already been allotted. I would like to have money as allotted to me. Will you allot me some money? Basically means already paid for. And what that means is, hopefully they spend their money on other things too, or charitable. But the fact is, this equipment is not easily replaced or maintenance or restored. Because we're talking equipment all the way from 1947, which would be on the newer side of the equipment that we have, all the way back there to a 1917 business car, a 1926 business car on the other side. All right, so when we get into projects like that, the back it's going to take us longer. It's like the Biltmore House on wheels. The room where they would, the men would smoke their cigars and brandy, the mahogany wood, that beautiful mahogany wood, all the way through staterooms, a large dining room table with sideboard tables involved in a private platform area in the back. Now, sometimes we have to re-restore. What does that mean? Well, someone decided that their version of restoration meant, such as that one, the mahogany went all the way up the walls, all the way to the ceiling. They decided it would be a great idea to paint that with a nice thick cream oil base over the mahogany wood. So we can't just take any chemical and remove it, it'll ruin the mahogany. So we have to take our time. Also, what did they use years and years ago to insulate houses and coaches like this that's not good for us today? Asbestos. Guess what you think was insulated in the car back then? And some of the cars we've had in the past, we had to take our time. Had to go through certain steps in safety protocol because of that. We get in there and there's some things that are very unique. Did you know that there's some things left in the walls, like a time capsule where someone purposely are flash or something they were drinking on the job and they get it, put it in the wall and put the wall back over it. The car back there, we try to historically restore all the equipment to at least one of the paint schemes, because some of this equipment has gone to several different railroads, right? Sometimes we have to really work on it because the car back there was used on the executive train for the Southern Railway for many years. And then they took more cars and used those in the executive train. Those were kind of left to the silent signs. And I really feel like going inside that car when we first got it over here, that they had hired Austin Powers to do their decorating. Because that's what we're talking about here. I'm talking something that if you're really not interested in this, okay, or you had some, let's say this, okay, you've had a teacher, a boss, family member, okay, if I was talking to you right now, I was just talking like this. Welcome to our museum. This is our railroad and this is our back shop. Can you tell? Does it sound like I care about what I'm talking about? Do you really think I'm interested? How are you going to be interested in this history if I'm not going to be interested in this history, right? One thing that we do here, and we have in common, whether we're out front talking, we do a little bit of everything, by the way, or we're back here working and restoring. The common theme and denominator is we care about what we're talking about and what we're doing, okay? And you can tell that from people you've met and talked to in your past and are associated with now. Now, let's talk about how long it takes. Why does it take us so long? Locomotive 630 out there, built in 1904. We came to the yard, you can see it, you get back on the train.
Por un segundo pensé que era todo. Bueno, ya vamos de regreso para la estación principal. Espero que les haya gustado esa parte de historia. Y si les está gustando, no olviden darle like, compartir, suscribirse a este canal. Bueno, ya vamos para la estación. Cambia de asiento nomás para ver la diferencia entre los vagones. Los asientos estos son un poquito más modernos. Es toda la diferencia. Ahora me llama la atención ese cuartito. Acaba la curiosidad si uno puede ir a ese cuarto. Creo que están los niños entrando y saliendo. Ya vamos a ir a explorar nosotros también. Oh, miren, en este lado se ve un poquito mejor el túnel. Esa es la curiosidad que es allá. Quiero ir a ver honestamente. Miren estas tomas, son tomas épicas, como dice Callejas. La locomotora, casi al frente de la locomotora. ¿Vieron esas tomas? Valió la pena seguir a los niños. Excelentes tomas. Acabo de quitar el protector de pantalla para poder grabar un poquito mejor, ya que honestamente miren cómo está de quebrado y sucio. Entonces creo que se va a ver mejor así. Espero que los otros videos se vean mejor. Estamos llegando a la estación. Aquí termina nuestra vuelta por el tren, por las vías del tren. Vamos a ir a la tienda a ver si compramos algo para Gerald, ya que él es amante de los trenes. Bueno amigos, este es mi último video acá en Tennessee. Espero que les haya gustado. Si les gustó, denle like, suscríbanse, compartan y nos estamos viendo en otro video.